Welcome to Hope. I'm your inspiration guide, Adam Gallus, on this epic quest for hope, health, and happiness as we explore the science-based magic and technology-fueled sorcery that's bringing about a Star Trek utopia of abundance, equality, justice for all humanity. Yes, each week I will bring to you the best science and fact-based evidence that the future is brighter than you could ever imagine. So hold on for the ride, because there's a new tool I want to share with you before we get started. It is called Perplexity. This is CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang's favorite AI model. It's also, think of it as ChatGPT for omni-powered search. So anything you want to ask it, it will go ahead, understand the context. You can have long threads. It will find it. It will source it. It can make tables. It can find videos. It can find images. Each search is about 20 different sources, all cited, and you can instantly bring it up. As a research tool, this is a potential Google killer, and this is bringing us to the new format for Hope. I'm going to include all of the show notes, the copy that you can look at, and of course full citations courtesy of Perplexity, so that you can actually dig down and learn more about this, because this channel is all about maximizing understanding and maximizing prosperity while minimizing suffering. That is my goal in life, the supreme moral imperative. So let's get to this week's episode. The obesity cure is possibly here. So let me show you the science-based magic and technology-fueled sorcery of what that could mean for you. So as you can see, compared to the rest of the developed world, back in 2015, 38% obesity rates. Oh my God, this is terrible. Well, guess what? This is expected to get worse. By 2030, it's expected to hit about 50%, and by 2050, possibly as high as 80%. That means heart disease and diabetes, 80%. Alzheimer's, potentially 40, 50% in later age. Any one of these things would bankrupt the country, destroy the republic. It would threaten civilization itself. But there is, of course, hope in the form. I found this a few weeks ago, courtesy of Google. The Godzilla weight loss drug, better than Ozempic. It's called retatrutide, and in recent studies, 24%, almost twice as effective in terms of weight loss over a 48-week period, averaging 60 pounds. Now, doctors will tell you 5 or 10 pounds of weight loss can have significant improvements. 60-pound weight loss, a quarter of your body weight. Oh my God. And they kept it off, by the way, for about a year and a half in this study. So women losing up to almost 30%. This is a potential game changer. So naturally, that's what the media would like you to believe. So we check with Perplexity, and yes, indeed, this has these studies say what it did, plus additional benefits for liver, type 2 diabetes, and side effects similar to Ozempic. Phase 3 clinical trials possibly on the market by 2025 or 2026. All right, so what does that actually mean for the hopeless world? Well, here's how that brings hope to a hopeless world. How about the economic benefits? Now, obesity, the CDC estimates that around 70 to 80% of healthcare costs are spent on chronic diseases. These are things that are lifestyle related. So obesity, largely, if you can cure obesity, that's a potential 80% reduction in healthcare costs. Now, for the government alone, that would be $1.4 trillion savings to Medicare and Medicaid. But let's talk about the economy as a whole. So Goldman Sachs ran some numbers. Now, there's 125 million Americans obese right now at that 42% obesity rate. So if 60% or half of them took these GLP-1 wonder drugs, The base case they estimate is a 0.75% increase in GDP. Okay, so slightly faster economic growth. And of course, what does that actually mean? Well, for each 1% increase in the growth rate of the economy, Bank of America estimates corporate earnings grow 3.8% faster per year, which means 3.8% faster returns in the stock market. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that the deficit per year is about $300 billion less because of higher tax revenue. And something called Oken's Law, an principle of economics, says that a 1% faster GDP growth rate reduces unemployment by about 0.75%. Now remember, this was estimating half of obese Americans. Let's say that this turns out to be so good, the government says insurance companies, we're going to save so much money, everybody who wants it can get it. Now, of course, Blue Zone lifestyles, as specifically Blue Zone vegan lifestyles, the healthiest lifestyles you can have, better than any kind of drug. But let's be realistic. We're not going to solve obesity through getting people to do Blue Zone living, at least not anytime soon. So if everybody took these drugs, that would be a 1.5% boost to GDP on the baseline, possibly as high as 2.2%. So that would mean corporate profits up 5.7% faster. We'll be talking about that next week. Unemployment falling to 2.8%. That's levels not seen since the 1950s. The deficit, that's what we're focusing on today, falling by $450 billion. That is a 33% reduction to just $1.05 trillion. Now, the 2024 deficit is expected to be $1.5 trillion or 5.6% of GDP. Now, there's a principle in economics called the sustainable deficit level. If you take the long-term growth rate, currently estimated at 1.8%, if you add in inflation, bond market is currently pricing in for the next 30 years 2.4%. That gives you 4.2% nominal GDP. So including inflation, the GDP is growing by 4.2%. So if the annual deficit is 4.2% of GDP or less, then debt to GDP will remain stable and there will not be a deficit crisis. So that is the number. We're trying, of course, to get it as low as possible, but you need to get under 4.2. 5.6 is too high. But if we can boost economic growth by 1.5% by curing obesity, now we have 3.8% GDP. That's the baseline, possibly as high as 4.5. And now the sustainable number is 5.7, possibly as high as 6.4. Meaning without even gridlock in Congress, we can't, changes in tax policy, that's not going to happen anytime soon. Entitlement reform, that's not going to happen anytime soon. But if we could just cure obesity, suddenly deficit crisis over. And remember that this is simply from $450 billion in higher annual tax revenues, the Congressional Budget Office estimate. Remember that we're saving the government $1.4 trillion by solving obesity. And remember, the deficit is 1.5. So in fact, 1.5 trillion minus 1.4 trillion in cost savings. Now it's a deficit of 100, but there's a 450 billion in higher taxes. Now there's a $350 billion surplus. Boom. Obesity can solve the deficit crisis, and we have the wonder drug. This is an example of how science-based magic and technology-fueled sorcery can truly give us hope for a hopeless world. And now to give you, of course, I like to end each week with some of these charts to actually prove that this is all actually evidence-based. This is not pie in the sky, Star Trek Utopia dreaming. No. Weekends are for dreaming, true, but it has to be evidence-based dreaming. So it's absolutely true. The world was awful. The world is awful. 4.3% child mortality. Absolutely, that's true. Guess what? It used to be 50%. And in some countries, it's only 0.5%. So yes, the world is awful, but it's much better than it was before. It can be better. And that's why we are fighting like hell with science-based magic and technology-fueled sorcery to bring about the utopia that some of us to enjoy, such as myself, that we must. It is a supreme moral imperative to minimize suffering, maximize prosperity, and maximize understanding for everyone on planet earth. And we are working towards that. Here, for example, HIV deaths per capita has been steadily improving, expected to keep improving, and we can and should accelerate that. Of course, wages growing in the US much faster than other countries. That's wonderful. But of course, what about inequality? Yes, you can see that rich really benefited for the last 40 years. Well, there is good news. Unlike the 1970s and 80s, this high inflation spike, the lowest income is mirror image, 12% inflation adjusted growth in wages, middle class up 3%. And look at the growth rates of these inflation adjusted wages, more than double the last 40 years for the middle class, and the lowest income 29 times faster. Now that is certainly news cause to celebrate. And you can see extreme poverty at record lows, education at record highs, literacy at record highs, child mortality at record lows, vaccination rates up, democracy still strong despite what you might have heard. Again, the trend in literacy, absolutely wonderful, empowerment and equality for all. It's the most peaceful world we've ever had, and things like child labor on the decline. And of course, the acceleration of technological innovation through AI, which JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon says could be as revolutionary as electricity and the steam engine. CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, this could be as important as fire. So there you go. Thank you so much for joining me. Next week, I will share with you how the boost in economic growth, not just from potentially these wonder drugs that can cure obesity, but just faster economic growth through AI innovation, could bring about Warren Buffett-like 15 to 20% returns in the stock market for several decades. And that could allow you to harness the genius of global capitalism to live your dreams. So join us next week. Thank you for joining us this week. Please subscribe to this channel, like this video to help other people find it on YouTube, and have hope, people. Truly, science-based magic and technology-fueled sorcery is bringing about the world of abundance, prosperity, justice, and equality of opportunity for all. Yes, Star Trek Utopia is coming, and every week I'll be bringing you the sourced and evidence-based facts and charts to prove it. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Without you, I never could have moved away.